Hey all. Welcome back to the channel. This is Six Path Weeb, and you already know what time it is. Today, we're diving into part 3 of our fanfic series, The Untold Journey of Naruko. Get ready for twists, emotions, and epic moments you won't see coming. Disclaimer. This content is purely for entertainment and discussion. I do not own any of the anime footage used in this video. All rights and credit go to the original creators and copyright holders. Let's jump right in, guys. The journey continues. Kakashi sighed quietly as he stepped back into the village. He had spent hours searching the nearby woods for his student, yet there was still no trace of her. Even his reliable tracking dogs had come up empty. Glancing up at the dusky sky with his weary eye, he muttered under his breath, frustration tightening his expression. He couldn't help but feel responsible for Naruko's current situation. No one had seen her for nearly a month in the lead up to the third exam, and rumors had begun to swirl, some even suggesting she had aligned herself with Orochimaru. Kakashi never believed those whispers for a moment, but his personal certainty carried little weight in the face of village speculation. Since there was no need to check in with Danzo, he turned instead toward Training Ground 7. He had hoped for a few moments of quiet at the monument, but his plans were interrupted by the sight of a familiar pink-haired girl racing toward him, her black-haired teammate close behind. "Kakashi-sensei, is it true?" Sakura asked, anxiety written all over her face. "Is it true that Naruko turned against the village?" Kakashi exhaled slowly, then offered her a small, reassuring smile as he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "No. That's not true. Naruko would never do such a thing," he said with confidence, giving her shoulder a light squeeze. "TCH. She probably ran away because she couldn't handle how weak she is," Sasuke remarked dismissively, turning his gaze away. Before he could react further, a sharp impact met his cheek, sending him sprawling to the ground. Kakashi now stood over him, arms still extended, an uncharacteristic sternness in his expression. "I've overlooked your attitude for a long time," he said in a calm but serious tone. "I even defended you when you were late to the Chunin exams. I tried to guide you toward humility, to help you understand that your teammates are your equals. But even now, you continue to look down on them. Let me make one thing clear." He crouched slightly, meeting Sasuke's startled gaze directly. "Naruko has always been stronger than you, not just in skill, but in heart." Sasuke stared up in stunned silence as Kakashi turned and walked away, Sakura following in his wake. For once, the young Uchiha was at a loss for words. Part of him wanted to argue, to insist he was superior. But another part, one he rarely acknowledged, felt the sting of regret. His expression twisted in conflict as he turned and quickly left the training ground. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit chamber in the land of sound, Orochimaru stood in growing frustration. His expression was stormy as he read over a scroll, the tension in the air palpable. The Sound 4, kneeling nearby, could barely stand the intensity of the atmosphere. My lord. Is something wrong?" Sakon asked hesitantly. "No, everything is not fine," Orochimaru snapped, barely containing his irritation. "First Kabuto vanished, and now Danzo refuses to uphold his end of our agreement." He swept his arm across the desk, scattering scrolls and documents in his frustration. "And on top of it all, Uzumaki Naruko has completely slipped through our grasp." "Should we retrieve the Uchiha anyway, Orochimaru-sama?" Kitamura asked cautiously. "No," Orochimaru said, calming slightly. "Danzo will have his eyes on him now. The opportunity has passed, and any attempt to reach him would be met with resistance." Gritting his teeth, he stared again at the scroll. His carefully laid plans were unraveling, and his frustration grew. "What should we do now, Orochimaru-sama?" Sakon asked, a bit more confidently. "I'll need to shift focus," Orochimaru replied, eyes narrowed. "The rest no longer matters." Without another word, he exited the chamber, leaving his subordinates in tense silence. Far from the commotion, Naruko slowly stirred awake. Her limbs felt heavy, and every small movement brought a dull ache. Yet, she noticed something surprising. She wasn't lying on the hard forest floor but rather on a soft, warm mattress. Her breath caught for a moment. She had no memory of arriving here, and the unfamiliar surroundings immediately set her on edge. Above her was a wooden ceiling. To her left, a delicate painting of a single cherry blossom tree hung on the wall. On her right, a desk was cluttered with various cosmetic items, a mirror leaning against the wall behind it. A modest bookcase stood nearby, and beyond it, a window showed the fading light of day. A nightstand beside the bed held a lamp, and two doors, one to the bathroom and one leading out, framed the cozy room. Sitting up slowly, Naruko noticed she was dressed only in modest undergarments. Her usual gear rested on the desk. Pushing aside the covers, she gingerly stepped out of bed, though a sudden pain in her side caused her to falter. Gritting her teeth, she placed a hand on her midsection and carefully made her way to the desk. As she reached for her pouches, the door suddenly opened. Standing in the doorway was a woman of stunning appearance, tall with long chestnut hair and kind green eyes. She wore a refined, short-sleeved red kimono that complemented her graceful figure. Her entire demeanor radiated warmth and calm. "You're awake," she said with a gentle smile. Her voice was melodic and soothing. "You've been resting for 3 days. We were getting worried." Naruko blinked in confusion. 3 days? She repeated, her voice wary. "Where am I? Who are you? Why am I here?" The woman's expression remained soft. "You're in a hostess inn in a small town in the land of hot water. My name is Izumi. As for why you're here," she added with a playful tap on her cheek, "someone else will explain that." Naruko remained cautious but didn't sense any threat. She nodded and watched Izumi quietly exit the room. Moments later, the door opened again, and this time a man stepped in, tall, with wild white hair and a confident stride. Naruko's muscles tensed instinctively. She didn't know him, but she could feel the strength radiating from his presence. "Good to see you up and about," he said with a grin. "I figured you'd be resting for a few more days. You weren't exactly in the best shape when I found you." "You found me?" Naruko asked sharply. "Who are you? Why am I here?" "You're here because this place is one of my safe spots," the man replied, closing the door behind him. "As for who I am," he struck a dramatic pose. "I'm the one and only Jiraiya, renowned author and shinobi extraordinaire." Naruko blinked, confused at first, then her eyes lit up in recognition. "Wait, you wrote Tales of a Gutsy Ninja?" Jiraiya beamed, clearly delighted. "You've read my work? You've got good taste." "Of course." Naruko grinned and reached for her gear, placing the book safely inside her pouch. "Now I just need the next volume." Jiraiya chuckled before sitting on a nearby chair. "It's good to see the next generation with such enthusiasm," he said warmly. "But let's get to the serious stuff now. Have a seat, it's going to take a little while." Naruko nodded, settling back onto the bed. Her eyes remained cautious but curious. "First," Jiraiya began, "I want to know why people are saying that Uzumaki Naruko cooperated with Orochimaru." Her eyes widened in surprise. "You know who I am?" He nodded. "How?" she asked. "That can wait," Jiraiya replied. "I want to hear your side of the story first." Naruko clenched her fists, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "Danzo sent me on a mission, claiming I needed to scout a potential enemy camp," she said with a firm tone. "But when I got there, I didn't find any nameless threats. I ended up facing Orochimaru and his subordinate. Orochimaru left shortly after, so I only had to face Kabuto. He was stronger than expected, but he underestimated me. I was able to defeat him. He didn't make it easy though, I definitely came out with a few marks." Jiraiya's expression grew serious. "Why would Danzo do that? Did they explain?" "Yes," Naruko said with a nod, eyes hard. "They told me he wanted them to erase my memory so he could turn me into one of his root operatives." "That sounds just like Danzo. From the moment the Kyuubi was sealed inside you, he probably wanted to control you," Jiraiya muttered. "But I can't figure out why Orochimaru would go along with that. Did they say?" Naruko shook her head. "No, they didn't explain more than that. So branding you as disloyal was just part of the plan. He knew no one would believe your story, and he'd be free to take you once you were captured," Jiraiya said thoughtfully. "You're fortunate I found you when I did." Naruko sighed. "Yeah, I guess I am." She looked at him curiously. "How do you know who I am? I don't think we've ever met before." "You haven't met me, but I've seen you," Jiraiya said with a smile. "When you were a baby. You looked just like your father, it moved me to tears. Now, you resemble him even more, though your mother's features are there too." Naruko's eyes widened. "You knew my parents?" "Of course," Jiraiya replied warmly. "I trained your father." "Who were they?" she asked softly, almost pleading. Jiraiya's smile turned gentle, tinged with emotion. "Your father was Namikaze Minato, a remarkable shinobi, strong and compassionate. Your mother, Uzumaki Kushina, was a wonderful woman with a kind heart and fierce spirit." Naruko's breath caught. "Yondaime? He was my father?" Jiraiya nodded, and Naruko lowered her head in thought. It all began to make sense, why the Kyuubi was sealed inside her. It wasn't easy to accept, but she could finally understand the reasoning. I was also your godfather, Jiraiya added quietly. Naruko looked up quickly, a flash of hurt and confusion in her expression. Then why weren't you there for me? Jiraiya sighed, regret in his eyes. I had responsibilities. After the Kyuubi incident, Konoha was vulnerable. I had to keep my spy network active to watch for threats. I couldn't take a child into dangerous territory. I planned to return when things settled, but it was always unpredictable. Naruko held her head and shut her eyes tightly, trying to keep her emotions in check. So much new information, so many years of questions, now suddenly answered. Do you have a picture? She asked quietly. Jiraiya nodded, reaching into his pouch. He handed her a small photograph. Naruko's hands trembled as she took it. In the photo, a man with blonde, spiky hair held a beautiful red-haired woman with gentle violet eyes. The couple's joy radiated toward the woman's rounded belly. Naruko stared at it, recognizing what it meant, and she couldn't stop the tears that began to fall. After a moment, she set the photo aside, wiped her eyes, and gave a small, bittersweet smile. All these years wondering. Now I finally know. They loved you, Naruko, Jiraiya said softly. More than anything. Naruko looked at him and nodded with gratitude. Thank you. Truly. Jiraiya waved her off playfully, though he quietly wiped away a tear of his own. It was long overdue. I'd asked Lord Third to let me be the one to tell you. I just didn't expect it to take this long. Gigi knew? She asked, surprised. Anyone else? Just one more, aside from us, Jiraiya replied. I'm not sure if anyone else figured it out. You really do look just like your father. Naruko gave a soft chuckle. Can you tell me about them? Not today, unfortunately. I have to leave soon, and there are a few important things I need to pass on before I go. I understand, Naruko said, a little disappointed but respectful. I promise, when I return, I'll tell you all the stories I know, Jiraiya said with a grin. And there are plenty. Naruko chuckled quietly. The mood lightened just a bit. Fair enough. So what do you need to tell me? First, I have something for you. Jiraiya handed her a scroll. After the Kyuubi attack, your parents' home was destroyed. This was the only thing I could save. What is it? Naruko asked curiously. Open it. It belonged to your mother. Naruko unrolled the scroll and released its seal. A single item appeared in her lap, a tanto, about the length of her forearm. Its white sheath gleamed softly, the handle wrapped in black with a white strap and a golden guard. She gently pulled it free. The blade was elegant and sharp, perfectly balanced in her hand. It felt right. She sheathed it and gave a small bow. Thank you, Jiraiya. Jiraiya smiled. It's yours now. And I'm not done. He pulled out 2 more scrolls. One has new clothes, I figured you wouldn't want to keep the ones you arrived in. The other contains materials to learn one of your father's signature techniques. Naruko's eyes lit up. You mean? The Rasengan, Jiraiya said as he held out his hand. A sphere of spinning chakra formed in his palm. Naruko watched in awe. It's a dense ball of chakra that can do significant damage, depending on how it's used. That's amazing, Naruko whispered. It is, Jiraiya agreed. He then brought out a balloon filled with water. Learning it takes 3 steps. This is the first, rotate your chakra until the balloon bursts. Try not to do it indoors though, he added with a sheepish smile as the water spilled. So I just need to burst it using chakra rotation? Naruko asked. Jiraiya nodded, impressed. Exactly. What are the other 2 steps? You'll find out on your own, he replied with a wink. Naruko sighed. Well, I can't complain. You've already given me so much. You'll begin training tomorrow. But first, a bit more advice. What's that? She asked. I'm heading back to the Land of Fire to find someone important, before Danzo does, he said with a serious look. While I'm gone, stay cautious. This place is safe, and you can trust Izumi. Don't go out during the day unless needed, and definitely stay inside at night. You can train indoors, just don't wreck the place. Naruko nodded. Got it. How long will you be gone? At least a week, Jiraiya replied, standing. I expect you to master the Rasengan by the time I return. I will, Naruko said confidently. Jiraiya grinned. No doubt. He turned to go, but paused at the door. Oh, and no shadow clones. Naruko smiled tightly but didn't argue. When the door closed, she let out a deep sigh. Her mind was still racing from everything she had learned. She gently placed the photo and tanto into her pouch, then climbed into bed, ready for rest. Just as her eyes began to close, the door creaked open. She sat up, expecting Jiraiya, but instead found herself face to face with the kind smile of Izumi. "Izumi-san," Naruko said, startled with a small blush. "Is something wrong?" Izumi smiled softly. "Not at all. I just saw Jiraiya-sama leave, and I wanted to let you know I'll be turning in for the night." She gently closed the door behind her. "Well, it is my room, Naruko-chan," she said with a soft laugh. Naruko blushed slightly and began to lift the covers. Then I'll sleep outside." "Nonsense," Izumi smiled, patting the bed. "It's big enough for both of us. Besides, we've already spent the last 2 nights like this, haven't we?" Naruko's face reddened even more, but she said nothing and scooted over to the very edge of the bed. Izumi chuckled gently and got in beside her. "Good night, Naruko-chan," she said warmly, turning off the lamp. "Good night, Izumi-san," Naruko murmured, turning away. It was going to be a long, quiet night. When Naruko woke the next morning, she was surprised to find she wasn't alone in the bed. It took her a moment to remember the events of the previous day, and she sighed in relief, realizing she was safe. As she looked down, she saw that Izumi had curled up beside her, resting peacefully. Izumi's head was on her shoulder, her hand lightly resting on Naruko's chest, their proximity making Naruko blush. She didn't want to wake her, but she couldn't move without doing so. Then, Izumi's bright green eyes opened slowly, and a gentle smile formed on her lips. "Good morning, Naruko-chan," she said with a tired but sweet voice. "Morning, Izumi-san," Naruko replied, her voice unusually high as her blush deepened. Izumi noticed their position and smirked playfully. "Oh my, Naruko-chan, we just met yesterday and already you're hugging me in your sleep?" Naruko panicked a little. I didn't mean to. I usually sleep alone, so I'm not used to this." Izumi giggled softly and patted her shoulder. "It's all right. No harm done." She sat up and stretched. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get ready for the day." Naruko quickly turned her head, trying to give her some privacy. She grabbed her gear and hurried to the door. "I'm going to train now," she stammered, slipping out quickly. Izumi's laughter followed her out. She walked into a quiet hallway that branched toward a stairwell and another door. Remembering Jiraiya's words about a training area, she headed for the other room. Opening the door, Naruko found a spacious area that looked like a dance studio, with mirrored walls and a calm, open atmosphere, perfect for training. Setting her gear down, she unsealed a scroll, retrieving her clothes. She dressed quickly, black pants, sandals, a sleeveless mesh shirt, and a light kimono top. She held her forehead protector for a moment, staring at the engraved leaf symbol. With a soft sigh, she stored it in her pouch, deciding she wouldn't wear it again until she had cleared her name. She grabbed the tanto that had once belonged to her mother, studying the blade. Light but strong, it felt balanced in her hand. She began moving through kata, practicing with calm precision. However, she noticed the style she had learned didn't quite fit the shorter blade. "I'll need to adjust my technique," she thought, sheathing the blade and setting it aside. She opened another scroll and unsealed a water balloon, the next step in her chakra training. The task seemed simple: pop the balloon using only her chakra. But after several minutes, the balloon only stretched instead of bursting. Despite the difficulty, Naruko didn't quit. She kept trying, her determination unwavering, even as frustration threatened to creep in. "I wish Pervy Sage gave me more tips," she muttered under her breath. Back in Konoha, the atmosphere was quiet, thoughtful. With the village mostly repaired, life resumed its flow. But among the younger shinobi, especially Teams 7, 8, and 10, the mood was somber. They had gathered at Training Ground 7 for the first time since the Chunin exams, not to train, but to talk. The topic on everyone's mind was Uzumaki Naruko. Despite being the so-called lowest ranked in their class, Naruko had surprised them all in the exams. Now, she was missing, labeled as a traitor, but not everyone was ready to believe that. Shikamaru sighed, finally breaking the silence. "This is getting troublesome. Sakura, you called us here, so talk." Sakura took a deep breath. "Do you believe what they're saying? That Naruko betrayed the village?" Silence. "What do you believe in?" Shikamaru asked back. "I believe in Naruko," Sakura said. "She may have been a prankster, but she's loyal. I don't believe she would ever turn her back on Konoha." "Same here," Shikamaru replied. "She always wore a mask, yeah, but behind it wasn't a traitor. But the evidence, Ino began. Could have been planted, Kiba interrupted. Agreed, Shino said quietly. My father spoke to me about her situation. And if the evidence is real? Ino asked hesitantly. Then we deal with it when we know for sure, Shikamaru said. Until then, I'll believe in her. Kuji grinned. Anyone who loves ramen that much can't be all bad. Ino glanced at Hinata and Sasuke, who had both been quiet. Hinata was calm, yet her eyes were distant. Sasuke looked tense, his emotions clearly mixed. Sasuke-kun? She asked. He looked up sharply. She wouldn't do that. No way. Ino smiled faintly. She was still uncertain but took comfort in everyone's faith. So what do we do now? She asked. We train. We do missions. And we wait, Shikamaru said. When she returns, we'll know the truth. They began their light training, the mood lighter but still thoughtful. They hadn't given up on Naruko. Back at the inn, Naruko sat on the bed, staring at the water balloon again. Someone must be thinking about you, Izumi joked gently. Naruko sighed, her eyes locked on the stubborn balloon. This thing just won't pop. Izumi moved closer, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. You've been pushing yourself all day, every day. You need to take a break. Naruko looked down. If I stop, I feel like I'll fall apart. Then rest, even just a little. You can't grow stronger if you burn out, Izumi said with a kind smile. Naruko smiled back, a bit more at ease. Thanks, Izumi-san. They sat side by side, sharing a peaceful moment. That night, when they lay down, Izumi rested her head gently on Naruko's shoulder, and Naruko, without hesitation, wrapped an arm around her. The balloon training could wait until tomorrow. 3 people and 1 pig sat at a table in a small town near the northeastern border of the Land of Fire. 2 women and 1 man sat in a thoughtful silence, broken only occasionally by a sharp glance from one of the women. Eventually, the man broke the quiet. Tsunade, we need your help, Jiraiya said with a sincere tone. Tsunade let out a small scoff. That's not going to happen, Jiraiya. I told you, I left that place behind a long time ago. Well, the village hasn't left you behind, Jiraiya replied firmly. Danzo's taken control, and it won't be long before he declares you a missing nin. You really think I'm worried about Danzo's agents? Do you know who you're talking to? Tsunade raised an eyebrow. Is that the path you want for your life? Jiraiya asked calmly, taking a sip of his drink. To stay on the run forever? It's better than going back there, Tsunade answered, her voice tinged with old pain. You know how much I lost because of that village. I do, Jiraiya said with a quiet sigh. But the people you lost, they'd never want this life for you. Tsunade's eyes narrowed sharply. What makes you think you know how they felt? I knew them well enough to understand that they wouldn't want someone they cared for to spend her life running from the past, Jiraiya replied with conviction. You know what their dream was? Yes, I do, Tsunade said, her tone edged with sorrow. And look what that dream cost them. Then what, would you let all their efforts go to waste? Jiraiya asked gently. What about our sensei? I won't support a fight that can't be won, Tsunade said with finality. Do you really think you and that young Kunoichi can do anything against Danzo? I believe in her, Jiraiya said firmly. Naruko understands how to uncover the truth behind Root and gather the proof needed to show the village what's really going on. And what can that girl do? Tsunade asked skeptically. She's just a young ninja who barely earned her rank. She's a chunin now, Jiraiya corrected her. And she's incredibly skilled. She managed to stop the Shukaku's rampage on her own. And I've already started teaching her the Rasengan. The Rasengan? Tsunade echoed in surprise. Why would you teach her that? Well, it was her father's technique, Jiraiya said meaningfully. Both women gasped softly. You can't mean, Tsunade murmured in disbelief. Jiraiya nodded. Yes. Naruko Uzumaki is the daughter of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. Kushina. Tsunade covered her mouth with her hand, tears forming in her eyes. But how? After the Nine Tails attacked, and Minato used the sealing technique, a child was discovered, their child, Jiraiya said gently. I knew they were expecting, but I didn't know when the baby would arrive. By the time I found out, I was already away from the village. But our sensei, he knew who she was. I can't believe it, Tsunade whispered as a single tear slipped down her cheek. If not for Konoha, Jiraiya said softly, would you consider helping, for her? Tsunade sat in silence, lost in thought. I'll think about it. All right, Jiraiya said, rising from the table. I'll be waiting at the northern exit of the village tomorrow morning. If you choose to come. And with that, he walked away. Silence settled between the two remaining women as the evening wore on. Tsunade slowly finished a bottle of sake, her expression weighed down with memories. Unable to watch her mentor drown in sorrow, the younger woman gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Tsunade-sama. What will you do? Shizune asked softly. Tsunade began, letting out a slow breath. I'm not sure. What do you think I should do? Shizune paused thoughtfully. If not for Konoha. Then for Naruko. You're her godmother, after all, she added with a tender smile. And I know Lady Kushina would want you by her daughter's side. Tsunade let out a faint chuckle. You always know how to say just the right thing. Shizune simply smiled in response. The two of them sat quietly a while longer, lost in thought, before eventually retiring for the night. 2 weeks had passed since Naruko woke up after her intense training session with Kabuto. She mostly stayed indoors, only stepping out briefly at night. Between perfecting her techniques and spending time with Izumi, her schedule was full, and she didn't mind. Naruko was already in the final phase of learning the Rasengan. After mastering the water balloon exercise, she figured out the second stage with relative ease. Thanks to her large chakra reserves, overloading the rubber ball was no trouble at all. Now she just needed to combine both stages to complete the technique. She had managed to form a Rasengan once, but holding it steady was still a challenge. She also practiced using her mother's tanto. By using shadow clones, she refined her sword techniques for close quarters combat, weaving in and out of reach to strike effectively. Upon examining the blade more closely, she found it was far easier to channel chakra through than her ninjato. She began infusing it with both wind and lightning chakra. The wind gave the blade exceptional sharpness and range, while lightning added piercing power and precision. Now, her goal was to switch between elements seamlessly to maximize its utility during missions. Her friendship with Izumi, however, left her feeling a bit puzzled. She knew she wasn't in love, but she enjoyed Izumi's company. They shared a close bond, though Naruko understood that it would likely be temporary. She was a kunoichi constantly on the move, and Izumi lived in a different country. If she had to describe it, she'd say they were close companions, more than friends, but without long-term expectations. Izumi didn't seem to mind either. Despite her busy routine, Naruko was starting to feel a bit restless. She had taken her swordsmanship as far as she could without new challenges, and she was confident she'd master the Rasengan soon. After that, she would have little to occupy her until Jiraiya returned. Letting out a sigh as her Rasengan attempt fizzled out, Naruko clenched her fist and let herself fall back onto the floor. It was nearing midday, and she expected Izumi to bring her lunch soon. Naruko made a mental note to thank her properly. Without Izumi, she might have gone without meals on several occasions. Suddenly, the door opened. Expecting Izumi, Naruko turned her head, only to see Jiraiya standing in the doorway. Yo, Jiraiya greeted her with a grin. You're back already? I figured you'd be gone much longer, Naruko replied as she stood up. Jiraiya gave her a sly smile. What if I said I wanted to give you more time with Izumi-chan? Naruko's cheeks tinted pink. Wait. How do you know about that? The older ninja chuckled. I didn't. But you just confirmed it. Naruko groaned and shook her head, playfully covering her face with her hand. So, since you're back, does that mean you found the person you were looking for? Of course, Jiraiya declared proudly. I'm the best tracker in the elemental nations. There's no one I can't find. Who was it? Naruko asked curiously. You'll meet her soon, he said, a hint of mischief in his voice. Now go pack your things and say your goodbyes. We're heading out. I'll be ready in 5 minutes, Naruko nodded and walked toward the room she shared with Izumi. Inside, she quickly gathered her gear, her pouches, her mother's tanto, and her sandals. As she turned to leave, she found Izumi standing quietly in the doorway. Izumi smiled warmly and stepped forward, wrapping Naruko in a gentle embrace. Safe travels, Naruko-chan. Naruko returned the hug, comforted by her friend's presence. Thank you, Izumi. Izumi giggled softly. I told you not to call me that. You make me feel old. Naruko smiled. All right, Izumi-chan. With a small laugh, Izumi pulled back and gave Naruko a soft kiss on the cheek. Take care, Naruko-chan. Goodbye, Naruko said, and with a final smile, she left the room and made her way to the roof. Jiraiya stood there waiting. As Naruko joined him, He gave her a nod, which she returned. In a blink, they disappeared with a sunshine technique, reappearing in a dense forest outside the town. Naruko turned to him, curious. So when do I meet this mysterious woman you've been chasing across the country? Jiraiya grinned and pointed behind him. Right now. She's already here. Two women stepped forward. Both were strikingly beautiful in different ways. One was tall, with long blonde hair tied in two ponytails, expressive brown eyes, and a diamond-shaped mark on her forehead. The other was shorter, with sleek black hair, calm black eyes, and dressed in a traditional kimono that gracefully outlined her figure. A small piglet rested in her arms, wearing a red vest and a necklace. The blonde woman walked up to Naruko first. Naruko looked up at her, curious but respectful, noticing the emotion in her gaze. You look just like her, the woman said softly. You have your father's eyes and your mother's smile. She gave a heartfelt smile. I'm so happy to finally meet you, Naruko. Then, much to Naruko's surprise, the woman gently pulled her into a warm hug. Naruko stood frozen for a moment, surprised by the embrace. She could feel the woman trembling slightly, her voice emotional. I thought I might never meet you. The woman whispered. Naruko looked up at her in surprise. Who are you? The woman stepped back slightly, laughing softly as she wiped a tear from her cheek. My name is Senju Tsunade. I am your godmother. Naruko's eyes widened. What? Tsunade laughed again, this time more gently and sincerely. I was very close to your mother for many years. I watched her grow from a spirited young girl into the strong and admirable kunoichi she became. I cared for her deeply, and when she asked me to be your godmother, I was honored. Her smile faded into something more wistful. I was away from the village when you were born. When I received the news about her, I was heartbroken. And I believed you were gone as well. Tsunade, Naruko said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. So much had changed in just a short time. She had learned that her parents had truly loved her, and now she'd discovered she had a godmother who cared too. It was a lot to take in. I'm not sure what to say. Tsunade gave her a soft, reassuring smile and pulled her into another warm embrace. Naruko hugged her back with gratitude. You don't have to say anything. Just know that I'm here for you whenever you need support. Naruko smiled and closed her eyes, holding back tears. Thank you. The other two companions watched the tender moment from nearby, smiling warmly. After a few quiet moments, the embrace ended, and Naruko turned toward the final person she didn't recognize. A kind-looking woman with dark hair stepped forward with a friendly smile. It's such a pleasure to finally meet you, Naruko-chan, she said. I'm Shizune, Tsunade-sama's apprentice. And this little one is Tonton, she added, gently lifting the small pig in her arms. Naruko returned the smile and gave a polite bow. It's wonderful to meet you too, Shizune-san. And you as well, Tonton-chan. Shizune smiled warmly, and Tonton gave a happy little oink. No need to be so formal, Naruko-chan. Just Shizune is fine. Naruko nodded with a soft smile. A light cough from Jiraiya shifted everyone's attention toward him. Now that we're all properly introduced, it's time we turn our focus to what comes next, he said with a serious tone. Of course, Tsunade agreed. As much as I'd love to spend more time with my goddaughter, I've heard she's found herself in a bit of a situation, she added, giving Naruko a knowing look. Naruko gave a slight sigh. It wasn't really my fault. Jiraiya chuckled. Regardless, we need a solid plan moving forward. So what do we do now? Naruko asked. Now, we focus on training, Jiraiya explained. Tsunade and Shizune will head back to Konoha and keep an eye on things from the inside. Meanwhile, you and I will travel elsewhere. Is that safe? Naruko asked, concern flickering in her expression. Don't worry, Jiraiya replied with confidence. Tsunade is more than capable, and now that she's returning willingly, things should remain peaceful. Won't Danzo be suspicious, though? He absolutely will, Jiraiya said, shaking his head with amusement. He'll likely have people watching her closely, but he can't act against her without just cause. Naruko nodded thoughtfully. What about us? We're heading to the land of water, specifically to Kirigakure. What? Naruko blinked in surprise, and the others shared her expression. Isn't that a place going through some serious changes? What could we possibly gain from going there? I know the situation, Jiraiya assured her. We're going to support the group striving for peace and unity. You'll gain invaluable experience, more than any lesson in a classroom. And we might earn some important allies. And they'll just welcome me? Naruko asked, clearly uncertain. Not us, just you, Jiraiya replied, pointing to her. I can't risk being seen with you. If Danzo finds out, it'll compromise everything, including Tsunade's safety. Besides, I've got a lead on an organization that needs investigating. Are you sure this is okay? Naruko asked, still unsure. You've got what it takes, Naruko, Jiraiya said as he gently patted her head. I believe in you. Naruko sighed and nudged his hand away playfully. What about my training? I know experience is great, but I still need to keep growing. I'll leave you a scroll filled with techniques and notes, and I'll give you some final pointers too, Jiraiya replied. You'll continue to improve. I promise. All right, Naruko said. Are we leaving right away? Yes, Jiraiya confirmed. I'd love for you and Tsunade to have more time together, but she needs to return to the village before anyone comes looking for her. Don't worry, Naru-chan, Tsunade said with a gentle smile, noticing the bittersweet look in Naruko's eyes. We'll celebrate when you come back to the village. Naruko rolled her eyes slightly at the nickname, but smiled. Okay. Well then, Jiraiya said, adjusting his stance. Let's move. Without another word, the four shinobi leapt into the trees, heading south. Meanwhile, in Konoha, Danzo sat quietly, gripping a report in his hand. It had been over 2 weeks, and there was still no sign of Naruko. Despite deploying the village's most skilled tracking teams, none had been able to locate her. He remained deeply frustrated. But Naruko wasn't his only concern. It was time to address Tsunade's return. He couldn't afford to let someone of her stature remain unchecked. As one of the village's most powerful kunoichi, her presence held great weight. Danzo had decided to offer her a single opportunity to return under his terms. If she refused, she would be labeled a missing nin and brought back by force. Fu, he called, and a quiet figure appeared in the room. Take a team and find Senju Tsunade. Hiruzen may have given her leeway, but I won't. If she declines to return peacefully, bring her in. As you wish, Danzo-sama, Fu responded, and vanished without a sound. With his orders given, Danzo returned to his thoughts. He was already contemplating movements involving nearby nations, though it wasn't time to act just yet. First, he needed to consolidate strength, to ensure Konoha remained respected and formidable, even without its Jinchuriki. Once Naruko was found, everything would fall into place. Team 7 walked through the gates of Konoha after completing their mission. With Naruko away, the team was assigned a new member, Sai. He was a skilled shinobi, though his ability to connect with others was still developing. Upon meeting the team, he gave them unusual nicknames, which made things a little awkward. Sai wasn't the only change. After Naruko left, Kakashi became more focused on training Sakura and Sasuke, dedicating time to both their strengths and weaknesses. Sakura trained extensively in endurance and genjutsu, while Sasuke honed his skills both with and without the Sharingan. The two Genin had grown. Sakura became quieter and more focused, spending her free time in the library, studying techniques and learning about the world beyond Konoha. She no longer followed Sasuke around and instead devoted herself to becoming stronger. Sasuke had changed the most. After a serious conversation with Kakashi, his behavior improved. He treated others with more respect and, although he remained reserved, he no longer distanced himself from everyone. He acknowledged others and made an effort to be more considerate. Kakashi felt proud of their progress. In many ways, Naruko's absence encouraged the remaining members to mature and work harder. Though her absence left a gap, it also pushed them to grow. He often thought about Naruko. He never believed she had done anything wrong and was relieved that his students shared that view. Kakashi wished he could speak to her and learn the truth, but for now, he could only continue being the best mentor he could be and remain hopeful. When Jiraiya returned to the village, he planned to speak with him about it. 4 figures moved swiftly through the trees of the Land of Fire. They planned to travel together for a short while before parting ways. Currently, they rested in a large clearing east of Otafuku-gai, one final pause before their separation. Take care of yourself, Naruko, Tsunade said warmly, giving the blonde a gentle hug. You too, Naruko replied with a smile, returning the embrace. As they separated, Naruko stepped next to Jiraiya. You remember the plan, Tsunade? Jiraiya asked. Tsunade nodded. Of course. Before he could continue, a sudden burst of shuriken flew their way, forcing them to leap into defensive positions. They scanned the area, preparing for the unexpected confrontation. 2 figures emerged from the shadows, a tall man with bluish skin carrying a large sword, and a shorter figure with long black hair and the unmistakable eyes of the Sharingan. They wore identical dark cloaks adorned with red clouds. Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame, Jiraiya said cautiously, recognizing the threat. The group immediately became alert. They knew these two were no ordinary opponents. Looks like we're a bit famous, huh, Itachi? Kisame said with a grin. Itachi said nothing, focusing intently on Naruko. She shifted uneasily under his gaze, sensing an unfamiliar force trying to disturb her focus. With a quick pulse of chakra, she shook off the sensation and turned her eyes away. Don't look into his eyes, she warned calmly. Seems the young lady's sharper than she looks, Kisame said with a mocking smirk. Indeed, Itachi replied quietly. Jiraiya's tone grew serious. What brings two high-level rogue shinobi here? We are not interested in the rest of you, Itachi stated. We came for Naruko. Jiraiya frowned. And why is that? That's not your concern, Itachi replied. If you allow us to take her without resistance, there's no need for conflict. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. That's not happening. Itachi gave a nod. Kisame, engage her. Without hesitation, Kisame rushed forward, swiftly closing the distance. He reappeared by Itachi's side just as quickly, grinning. Everyone turned to Tsunade, who was trembling slightly, visibly shaken. Jiraiya glanced at Kisame and realized what had happened. The tactic had unsettled Tsunade deeply. What's wrong? Naruko asked, concerned to see the always composed Tsunade reacting this way. She has a deep-seated fear, Jiraiya explained gently. Shizune, please help her. Understood, Shizune said, supporting Tsunade and retreating to a safe distance. Jiraiya turned to Naruko. So, what's your plan? Naruko focused her gaze on Kisame. I'll take on the tall one. He fights head-on using his sword and water techniques. I can counter with lightning-based moves. But I don't have much experience facing the Sharingan or Genjutsu, so I'll leave Itachi to you. Jiraiya gave an approving nod. Good analysis. Be cautious, Kisame is extremely strong. I know, Naruko said, watching her opponent. Well, looks like the ladies have made up their minds, Kisame said playfully. Shall we begin? He charged forward with his sword raised. Naruko met him with her own blade, and their weapons clashed powerfully. The impact made her arm tremble from the force, but she held her ground. With determination, she pushed forward, deflecting the attack and aiming a spinning kick at Kisame. He blocked it easily, though. Not bad, Kisame said. Naruko quickly leapt back, avoiding the counterattack. Let's see how you handle this, Naruko replied, activating her lightning chakra to enhance her speed and strength. Kisame grinned, excited for the challenge. Bring it on. And with that, the two clashed once more. Jiraiya and Itachi faced each other with calm intensity, both understanding the weight of a first move in a battle of this level. A single misstep could determine the flow of the entire encounter, and only those with the sharpest instincts could recover from an initial miscalculation. Jiraiya thoughtfully reviewed his options, recalling everything he knew about Itachi. The Uchiha was a remarkably skilled shinobi, his taijutsu was refined, and his ninjutsu and genjutsu were on an elite level, as expected of someone from his clan. A subtle motion from Itachi's hand alerted Jiraiya. He immediately turned, kunai in hand, intercepting the blade of a shadow clone. With a precise kick, he dispelled the clone, but had no time to pause, quickly defending against another swift strike from the real Itachi. Without giving Jiraiya time to counter, Itachi released a wave of fire from his mouth. Reacting quickly, Jiraiya used a substitution technique to evade and reappeared behind the Uchiha. Itachi leapt into the air, narrowly avoiding a kunai aimed at his neck, and retaliated by launching a flurry of kunai toward the Sannin. Landing at a safe distance, Itachi sent another burst of flame from his mouth. In response, Jiraiya slammed his hands onto the ground, summoning a dense wall of mud to intercept the attack. As the flames subsided, Jiraiya focused chakra into his right arm and struck the mud wall, launching solid blocks of earth toward Itachi with impressive speed. The Uchiha Sharingan enabled him to predict their paths and evade gracefully, his hands already forming another sequence of seals. A majestic dragon-shaped flame erupted from his mouth, surging toward Jiraiya. The Sannin countered with a wall of water, the clash of elements resulting in a tremendous burst of steam that shrouded the area. Itachi remained vigilant, scanning the mist. Suddenly, he had to leap away as two hands emerged from below, attempting to trap him. Before he could regain his footing, Jiraiya burst from the ground, sending another fireball his way. The flames engulfed Itachi, but it was not enough to overwhelm him. Still alert, Jiraiya blocked a sudden kunai aimed at his neck. Itachi's cloak showed signs of singeing, but he was otherwise unharmed. Channeling chakra into his hair, Jiraiya extended his ponytail, attempting to wrap it around his opponent. Itachi pressed forward with his kunai, forcing Jiraiya to retreat slightly before leaping away. Itachi launched several kunai that quickly multiplied into dozens. Jiraiya responded by manipulating his hair into a sturdy cocoon, shielding himself from the barrage. The projectiles bounced harmlessly away as Itachi followed with another fireball. This time, Jiraiya had no time to escape the flames completely and had to rely on his reinforced hair for protection. Though his clothing was singed at the edges and his hair tossed wildly, Jiraiya charged through the blaze, using the momentum to strike again. Itachi dodged instinctively, but Jiraiya found a narrow opening. Channeling chakra into his hand, he formed a dense, spiraling orb of energy. With precision, he aimed for Itachi's side. Itachi's experience kicked in, he avoided the full impact, but not entirely. The force sent him flying, and he landed with effort, one hand instinctively holding his side. He could feel the strain from the hit. It was clear that a full force blow from the Rasengan would have been extremely difficult to endure. Regaining composure, Itachi offered a calm nod of respect. "You are every bit as formidable as they say, Jiraiya-sama," he stated with admiration. "A truly impressive opponent." Jiraiya, still catching his breath, didn't press the attack. It had been quite some time since he engaged in a battle of such intensity. "I could say the same about you, Itachi," he replied. "Such talent at such a young age, truly exceptional." "This match may reach a standstill if we continue as we are," Itachi observed, his Sharingan glowing as it rotated. "Shall we raise the stakes?" Jiraiya grinned. "I was hoping you'd suggest that." Naruko parried another swing of Kisame's sword to the side and raised her lightning-coated leg to land a strong kick to the man's face. This time, Kisame didn't block, knowing that the lightning chakra would most likely paralyze his arm. He leaned his head back, avoiding the kick, and swung his sword back to catch the incoming leg. Naruko quickly adjusted, diverting her leg toward the sword. The leg and the sword collided with a loud bang, and Naruko kicked off the sword, spinning around with the added momentum to strike Kisame's ribs. Kisame grunted in annoyance and jumped away to evade before thrusting his sword forward and charging. Naruko, still in the spinning motion, bent her stationary leg in a crouch to let the sword pass over her head before clashing her tanto against the attacking weapon, sending it into the air. Seizing the opening, she pointed her tanto at Kisame and thrust it toward him. Kisame saw the sharp blade heading for his chest and quickly kicked Naruko's hand, making her lose her grip on the tanto. The tanto slipped out of her hand and stabbed the ground several feet away. With her weapon lost, Naruko jumped back to gain some distance. "You're pretty good for someone so young," Kisame said with a grin as he leaned his sword on his shoulder. "And you're pretty good for a fish," Naruko replied, her own grin forming. Kisame's grin grew more sinister. "Oh, I will enjoy tearing you apart," he said, pointing his sword at Naruko. "I'd like to see you try," Naruko said confidently, her smirk unwavering. Kisame reacted immediately, spinning around to slice Naruko's shadow clone in two, leaving his back exposed to Naruko. That opening was all the original needed. Her hands flashed through hand seals, and a beam of lightning shot from her mouth toward Kisame. The larger man smirked as he saw the beam, a good strategy, but not good enough. Naruko watched in surprise as Kisame's raised sword absorbed the lightning beam in mere seconds. She could have sworn the sword almost seemed to enjoy it, as if it had just received a delicious meal. Her eyes shifted back to Kisame's grin. "What was that?" Naruko asked, confused. "Like it?" Kisame chuckled. "This is Seimata. It absorbs chakra. And shreds," he added, as the bandages covering the sword unraveled. Now, Naruko could see the sword in all its glory, covered in blue spikes. "I think we've had enough fun, don't you?" With that, he charged at Naruko once more. Naruko barely managed to dodge a swipe that would have taken her head off and backflip to avoid a kick to her chin. Making two shadow clones, Naruko's hands flashed through hand seals as the clones charged at Kisame. The clones were destroyed instantly, but they gave the original enough time to complete her technique. Taking a deep breath, Naruko unleashed a strong gust of wind at her opponent. Kisame raised his sword to protect himself, but he could do nothing as the wind blade sliced into his arms and legs. As the attack ended, Kisame lowered his sword, only to realize that Naruko was no longer where she had been. Sharpening his senses, he barely turned around in time to block an attack from behind. While Kisame was distracted by Naruko's earlier attack, she had grabbed her tanto from the ground and was now attacking him from behind. Her surprise attack failed, and now she was struggling to push her weapon against the much larger sword. Her teeth clenched as Kisame began to overpower her, but with a defiant roar, she pushed back with all her strength. Then, bright light engulfed them. Dash! Shizune watched in awe as two battles unfolded in front of her. She knew Jiraiya was strong and could match Itachi, but she never expected Naruko to be able to hold her own against the S-rank Kisame and survive. The young girl stood her ground, matching Kisame's every move, but Shizune knew the rogue ninja wasn't fighting with everything he had. If he were, Naruko might not have lasted this long. Tsunade was by her side, still trembling, yet her eyes never left the young girl fighting in front of her. She cursed her own weakness, feeling helpless and unable to assist. She hated feeling like deadweight, but there was nothing she could do. The blood on her face brought all those painful memories rushing back. Dan, Nawaki, and all the others she couldn't save appeared in her mind once again. She watched Naruko send a gust of wind at Kisame before attacking him from behind. Then, she gasped in shock as bright light filled the area. At first, there was nothing. Then a pained scream echoed across the clearing. Jiraiya and Itachi paused their battle, looking toward the source of the cry. Their eyes widened as the light faded, revealing the scene before them. Naruko stood there, a weapon gripped in her hands. It wasn't her usual tanto, but a transformed blade. In her grasp was now a greatsword, with a wide, straight blade as dark as night, its length matching her height. The sword's handle was wrapped in white tape, with excess tape hanging from the pommel. In front of her, Kisame knelt, his left arm missing. The onlookers gasped in shock as Kisame's arm rolled across the ground, and his shoulder poured blood. He stared at the stump in disbelief, still processing the reality of the situation. Naruko was just as stunned, more by the enormous sword in her hands. Despite its size, the blade was surprisingly light, and she had no trouble holding it up. The black blade gleamed in the sunlight, and the blood on it appeared almost purple under the sun's rays. Ah, it's so good to be out again. What's up, Kushi, who are you? Naruko glanced at her sword in shock as a voice echoed in her mind. It sounded feminine and completely out of place for such a menacing blade. She winced slightly as the voice started to shout in her head. Who are you, and why are you wielding me? Where is Kushi-chan? Naruko muttered quietly, what is going on? The voice growled playfully, preparing to rant once more when it was interrupted by a much darker, more menacing growl. Naruko looked down at Kisame and met his furious gaze. His eyes were filled with a promise of pain, and a chill ran down her spine. You, Kisame hissed at the blonde. You'll regret this. With a roar, Kisame leapt forward, charging at Naruko with his sword raised. Naruko expertly blocked each of his attacks with her giant blade, noticing that his movements were slower than before. His face was ashen, and each swing of his sword grew weaker. Blood continued to pour from his severed arm, and it was clear his condition was rapidly worsening. Naruko deflected a particularly weak swing, pushing Kisame's sword aside before spinning around to land a decisive strike. In one swift motion, she sliced through Kisame's defenses, rendering him helpless. The battle was over, and Kisame could do nothing to stop her. Dash! Jiraiya stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching the scene unfold in awe. His battle with Itachi was forgotten as he took in the sight before him. He never expected to see that blade again, nor did he imagine that Naruko could wield it so effortlessly. He couldn't believe she was now facing off against an S-rank rogue ninja. Deep in thought, he failed to notice Itachi's sudden movement until it was too late. Itachi dashed toward Naruko and Kisame, appearing before them in an instant. His ninjato was drawn, and with precision, he blocked Naruko's blade just before it could strike Kisame down. Without hesitation, Itachi batted the larger sword aside and swung his ninjato toward Naruko. Caught off guard by the sudden interruption, Naruko couldn't react in time. Itachi's blade cut along the right side of her face, and before she could defend herself, the ninjato pierced through her chest. Naruko's eyes widened in shock as she crumpled to her knees, the sword lodged deep within her. Itachi wasted no time, grabbing Kisame and leaping onto a massive crow he had summoned. Just as they took flight, Tsunade's chakra-coated fist slammed into the ground where Itachi had been moments before, narrowly missing him. As the bird flew off, Tsunade's furious gaze locked onto Itachi's form, her anger transforming into deep concern as she turned to Naruko. Naruko was pale, teetering on the edge of consciousness. Blood dripped from her chest, and her face was streaked with injury. Tsunade's heart raced as she saw the severity of the damage. Her priority was clear, she needed to stop the bleeding and save Naruko. Tsunade knelt beside her, carefully removing the sword from Naruko's chest. With swift precision, Tsunade placed her glowing hands over the wound, beginning the delicate and intense process of healing. She was so focused on Naruko's life that she didn't even notice Jiraiya and Shizune appearing by her side. Tsunade's only thought was to save Naruko's life, no matter the cost. Omigakure had long been one of the most devastated villages during the ninja wars. Positioned at the crossroads of the fire, wind, and earth countries, it became a battleground for rival factions. While the larger nations could fight without consequences to their lands, Omigakure suffered greatly. Though the village itself was largely untouched, its people and countryside endured immense hardship. It was only thanks to the leadership of Hanzo that the village wasn't completely ruined. However, following the end of the wars, Hanzo too met a tragic fate, betrayed by those within his own ranks. In his absence, Omigakure came under the rule of an enigmatic leader named Pain, a figure revered by the citizens as a god due to his remarkable strength. Pain embraced this title, never denying it. At present, Pain, with his distinctive orange hair, stood atop the tallest tower of Omigakure, silently watching over the village. The heavy rain poured around him, yet he remained unaffected. His expression was cold, and his posture relaxed as his heightened senses surveyed the area. He was waiting for a report from two of his most trusted subordinates, but there was no sign of them yet. Though he had no reason to be concerned about their strength, their silence unsettled him. Suddenly, Pain's attention shifted as he sensed their arrival. One of the signatures stood out as weaker than the others, causing his brow to furrow in curiosity. Moments later, a large bird flew beside him, bringing two figures who dismounted as the bird vanished in a puff of smoke. Pain's expression became more serious when he saw one of his most formidable subordinates injured. "Itachi, what is going on here?" Pain asked in a calm but commanding tone, his gaze focusing on Kisame's injured shoulder. "That will have to wait, Pain-sama," Itachi responded, his voice steady. "Kisame requires immediate medical attention." "I can see that," Pain replied coolly. "Zetsu, take Kisame to the infirmary and prepare an arm for him." "As you command," a voice from the floor below responded, and a figure resembling a plant-like creature emerged, lifting Kisame to carry him away. With Kisame taken care of, only Itachi and Pain remained. Pain turned his attention back to the mission at hand. "Report." "We tracked the Jinchuriki as per your instructions," Itachi began. The target was accompanied by Jiraiya, Tsunade, and another kunoichi. Kisame quickly incapacitated Tsunade, and he faced the Jinchuriki while I dealt with Jiraiya. "You're telling me that a mere Jinan was able to injure Kisame?" Pain asked, his voice skeptical, though his expression remained unreadable. "Yes," Itachi confirmed. "Initially, Kisame was in control, but the Jinchuriki, Naruko, managed to sever Kisame's arm with a stroke of luck. I had to intervene to prevent any further harm." "A stroke of luck, you say?" Pain inquired, raising an eyebrow in interest. "What happened?" "It was during the battle when Naruko's Tanto blade unexpectedly transformed into a broadsword," Itachi explained. "The sword was in a perfect position to sever Kisame's arm." Pain considered this for a moment. "I see. What other skills did Naruko display?" "Along with impressive kenjutsu, Naruko demonstrated strong abilities in both wind and lightning ninjutsu," Itachi reported, detailing the encounter. Pain remained silent, mulling over the new information. "Do you have any insight into this sword?" Itachi shook his head. "At first, it was just a regular Tanto. Naruko herself was surprised when it transformed. We have no idea what it might be." "It is unfamiliar to me as well," Pain said, shaking his head. "But for now, it's of little concern. Focus on your recovery. Once Kisame is healed, you'll be assigned another task." "As you command, Pain-sama," Itachi replied, bowing before departing. Left alone, Pain continued to reflect on the situation. While Kisame's injury was a setback, it wasn't a major one. Kisame's resilience and combat prowess meant he could bounce back quickly. Yet, Naruko's unexpected strength intrigued him. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "It seems the Kyuubi Jinchuriki is stronger than we anticipated," said a calm, feminine voice from behind. Pain turned to see Konan, his longtime friend and confidant, standing there. She was a striking woman with blue hair and amber eyes, her expression just as emotionless as his own. "It seems so," Pain replied. "What are your thoughts, Konan? Do you plan to send someone else after the Kyuubi?" she asked. "No," Pain said, his voice firm. "The Kyuubi is not a priority right now. After we seal the other beasts, I will personally handle Naruko." "Aren't you concerned she may grow even stronger?" Konan pressed, her tone neutral. "No matter," Pain said dismissively. She will never surpass a god. With that, the conversation fell silent, and both leaders gazed out at the rain, each lost in their own thoughts. In a small town on the fire and water border, a single individual slept in a hotel. She was lying on a bed, her chest and half of her face covered in bandages. Her long hair spread across the pillow as she breathed evenly. The door to her room opened, and a young black-haired woman entered, moving to the bed to check on her. Shizun's hands glowed with chakra as she checked the condition of the blonde. Her wounds had healed nicely over the 5 days she had been unconscious, and Shizun expected her to wake up any time now. Just as she thought that, a single blue eye cracked open, and Shizun leaned over the blonde. "Good morning, Naruko-chan," she said softly, looking at her face. The blonde in question didn't immediately hear her, nor did she notice her at first, as her thoughts slowly began to return to the last moment she remembered, a sword being lodged in her chest. "Am I dead?" Naruko thought tiredly. Her eye finally focused on the woman above her. Who is she? Is she an angel? She thought as her eye tried to make sense of the blurry image of her face. She saw her dark eyes flash in concern, and her pink lips moved. A single thought ran through her mind as she looked at her. She's pretty. Her arm suddenly raised, and she cupped the back of the woman's head before pulling her down and kissing her. Shizun's eyes went wide as Naruko's dry lips connected with hers. Naruko wasted no time as she deepened the kiss, moving her other hand to Shizun's cheek. Shizun stood frozen, her lips unconsciously moving alongside Naruko's. She wanted to pull back and break the kiss, but something inside her urged her to continue. She didn't have much experience, having traveled with Tsunade for most of her life and spending much of her time keeping her master out of trouble. Relationships weren't exactly a priority for her. The kiss was suddenly broken when a cough resounded through the room. Shizun shot up instantly and looked at the source, her face turning bright red. Naruko also looked at the intruder and saw a beautiful blonde woman with a confident smile. "Am I interrupting?" Tsunade asked, her lips quirking into a smirk. "Tt Tsunade-sama." Shizun squeaked, covering her red face. "What the?" Naruko croaked quietly as her ears finally registered the sounds around her. She tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in her chest stopped her, and she immediately dropped back on the bed with a groan. "Good morning, brat," Tsunade greeted with a smile. "Good to see you're awake." I'm not dead?" Naruko asked quietly, her voice hoarse, as the busty woman moved to her side and helped her drink some water from a glass on the nightstand. "Of course you're not dead. You had my healing skills to help you, after all," Tsunade said with a laugh as she placed the glass back on the nightstand. "Tea then?" Naruko sputtered as her eyes moved to the blushing form of Shizun. Tsunade chuckled in amusement. "It seems you had quite a moment with my apprentice, brat. Should I be worried?" Naruko blushed furiously. "I'm sorry, Shizun-san," she said, embarrassed. "It's alright, Naruko-chan," Shizun replied, still blushing. Another bout of laughter escaped Tsunade as she looked at the two. Her laughter soon drew out another person as Jiraiya of the Sannin appeared at the doorway. "You're awake," he exclaimed as he looked at his goddaughter. Then he noticed the blush on her face, as well as Shizun's, and the laughing Tsunade. "What did I miss?" "Oh, nothing much," Tsunade replied, waving her hand in amusement. "Just our two students sharing a moment like teenagers." Jiraiya grinned as he heard that, patting Naruko on the back. "Good job, kid." "Shut up," Naruko replied, rolling her shoulders to ease the stiffness. "So, what happened? Last I remember was almost cutting that fish's head off, then." Her hand shot up to her face, and she felt the bandages around it. "Don't tell me." "Yeah, Itachi happened," Jiraiya replied. "I'm sorry, Naruko. I failed to stop him in time." Naruko clenched her fists as the memory of Itachi's sword flashed through her mind. "No, it was my fault. I didn't pay attention to my surroundings." "I'm sorry I couldn't save your eye, Naruko," Tsunade said as she placed a hand on her shoulder. "It seems Itachi's sword was coated in some sort of poison that cauterized your wounds extremely fast. I had to focus on your chest injury, or you would have suffered much worse." Naruko nodded in understanding and swung her legs over the bed, attempting to stand. Her legs almost gave out, but Tsunade was quick to catch her. "You shouldn't move yet," she said softly as she removed her hands. "I have to see," Naruko replied, walking toward the mirror on the wall and unwrapping her bandages with each step. She looked at her reflection and frowned. The first thing she noticed was the scar on the right side of her face, extending from above her brow and over her eye. The eye itself had a deep gash running through the iris, the crystal blue lost beneath a dark stain. Her gaze then lowered to the scar on her chest. Her fingers traced both scars before she shut her eyes and clenched her fist. She slowly rewrapped her face, hiding her injured eye, before turning back to the others. How long until we leave? As soon as Tsunade says you're fit for traveling, Jiraiya replied. He noticed that Naruko was hiding her emotions but didn't push her. She would talk when she was ready. We were supposed to be in the land of water by now. We also can't risk being seen by Danzo's men, who are probably searching for Tsunade by now. Naruko nodded and turned to Tsunade, who sighed. As much as I'd love to make you stay in bed, I know I can't. Your wounds have healed, but you should still take it easy for a while. All right, Naruko said, sitting back on the bed. Then she noticed she was only in her undergarments. Where are my clothes? And my gear? Jiraiya tossed her a bundle of clothes and her pouches. Your clothes got ruined in the fight, and I don't have another set on me, he explained as Naruko began to dress. Your sword is over there, he finished, pointing at the weapon leaning against the wall. Fully dressed, Naruko went to her sword and picked it up. It was as light as she remembered, which was strange for a blade of its size. She also remembered hearing a strange voice coming from it, but it was silent at the moment. Figuring it was just her imagination, she focused on a much bigger problem: how to carry the sword around. Jiraiya noticed her concern and smirked before tossing something to Naruko. I made this for you. It's not much, but it will do the job for now. Naruko caught the object and noticed it was a strap for the sword. She strapped it around her back and locked the sword in place. It wasn't anything special, but it worked. Seeing she was ready, Naruko turned to Jiraiya. Shall we? Jiraiya nodded. Let's go then. Tsunade, Shizune, it was nice to see you again, he smiled at the two women and left the room. Now left alone with the women, Naruko bowed. I want to thank you for everything. You saved my life. Tsunade smiled and hugged her gently. Don't mention it. Just be safe, alright? Naruko nodded, returning the hug. The two separated, and Naruko turned to Shizune. Thank you as well, Shizune-san, she said with a small blush on her face as she remembered their kiss. Shizune also blushed as she approached Naruko and wrapped her arms around her. It was nothing. Be careful, Naruko-chan, she said, tightening her hold for a moment before they separated. With a small smile for both women, Naruko turned around and left the room, following after her sensei. The pair of student and teacher were currently aboard a trade ship, making their way toward the shores of the land of water. Both had disguised themselves as unremarkable men to remain unnoticed by Kiri's main forces. They would disembark when the ship reached the port on the main island and then continue their journey toward the rebel camp. The rebels had established their camp to the south of the island, strategically hidden by the island's natural defenses. It was located far from Kirigakure, surrounded by rocks and mist, making it extremely difficult to locate. It was only because of Jiraiya's vast network of spies that he knew where it was. Inside a modest two-bedroom cabin, the two waited patiently for their trip to end. They had been traveling by sea for over a day, and there were only a few more hours before they reached their destination. After a good night's rest, Jiraiya thought it was the right time to discuss the training plans with Naruko. Producing a scroll, Jiraiya handed it to Naruko, who accepted it with curiosity. What's this? She asked. Your training regimen, Jiraiya replied. I've included a book on basic and intermediate Fuinjutsu, along with some of my personal techniques and seals for you to practice. By the time we meet again, I expect you to have mastered everything inside. Naruko nodded and stored the scroll in her pouch. Got it. But just so you know, I'm still a bit skeptical about this whole situation. Why would the rebels want our help? Or train me? Because we have something they will definitely want, Jiraiya said, pulling out another scroll and unsealing it. What appeared made Naruko's eyes widen in surprise. That's Zabuza's sword, she said, recognizing the famous weapon. Kubi Kiribocho. Exactly, Jiraiya replied, sealing the sword back into the scroll. Kakashi told me about it, so I went to wave to retrieve it. Naruko sighed as she recalled her first mission out of the village. It had been physically and emotionally exhausting, testing both her strength and her resolve. Despite the hardships, she and her team had emerged victorious, but the experience had left lasting marks. It had been necessary, she realized. It had helped her grow as a shinobi. I'll trade the sword for your training, Jiraiya said. Besides, they need all the help they can get, and you're practically a one-person army with your clones. Naruko nodded thoughtfully. Jiraiya's plan seemed solid, and the chances of failure seemed slim. The rebels couldn't afford to let a weapon as powerful as Kubi Kiribocho fall into the wrong hands. The ship's horn sounded, signaling that they were nearing the port. They exchanged a serious look, packed their belongings, and prepared to leave. An hour later, after docking, the two were on their way south toward the rebel camp. The sun was beginning to set, its light slowly fading through the mist that enveloped the island. Jiraiya estimated they would reach the camp soon, and Naruko was eager to rest after the long journey. Before long, they sensed several presences in the area. Instantly alert, they began preparing for any possible conflict. When they reached a small clearing, they were surrounded by 4 individuals, each wearing a Kiri forehead protector. "Stop where you are," the leader of the group commanded. He was a man in his 30s with blue hair, an eye patch over his right eye, and dressed in a green kimono. A talisman hung from his ear. "State your names and purpose." "Jiraiya of the Sannin, and Uzumaki Naruko," Jiraiya answered in an authoritative tone. "We've come to speak with the rebel leader." The 4 shinobi visibly stiffened at the mention of Jiraiya's name. He was renowned worldwide as one of the most powerful shinobi. The fact that he knew the location of the rebel camp made the situation even more serious. "Why do you want to see our leader?" the same man asked, trying to maintain his composure. He realized attacking them would be futile, and diplomacy seemed to be the only viable option. "That's for your leader to hear," Jiraiya replied firmly. The man sighed and nodded. There was no point in pressing for more information. He couldn't trick Jiraiya into revealing anything, and if things escalated, it would be disastrous. He motioned for them to follow. Soon, a large camp came into view. It was full of tents, and the sounds of people training and resting filled the air. As they walked through the camp, several individuals noticed them, eyeing the newcomers curiously. The presence of their second-in-command eased some of their concerns. They soon arrived at the largest tent, where the leader signaled them to wait outside. After a few minutes, he returned and gestured for Jiraiya and Naruko to follow him inside. Inside, they were greeted by 2 individuals. One was a young man, barely older than Naruko, with spiky blue hair and a strange sword on his back. The other was a beautiful woman with long auburn hair and striking green eyes, dressed in a blue battle dress. Naruko couldn't help but notice the woman's powerful aura and the commanding presence she held. The woman's gaze focused on Naruko first, observing the bandages on her face. She noted how young Naruko appeared and wondered how someone so young had already endured so much. Her eyes then traced the whisker marks on Naruko's face, which she found charming. If the situation were different, she might have found herself wanting to reach out and touch them. Naruko was well built for a shinobi, and her chakra levels were impressive. The second person, however, was instantly recognizable. His long white hair and the distinct forehead plate marked him as Jiraiya, a legendary shinobi. The woman smiled and stood, walking around her desk to address the 2 newcomers. "I am Terumi Mei, the leader of the rebel forces. Ao here has informed me that you wish to speak with me." "Pleasure to meet you, Terumi-san," Jiraiya said, offering a respectful bow. "I am Jiraiya, and this is Naruko. We have come to offer our assistance in the war." Mei raised an eyebrow. "A ninja from another village wouldn't offer help unless there's something in it for them," she said, studying Jiraiya with suspicion. "So, let's get to the point." Jiraiya grinned at her perceptiveness. "You're right, but what I'm asking for is training for Naruko." Mei's confusion deepened. "Why would you want us to train her?" she asked, her eyes shifting to Naruko. "Shouldn't Konoha be the one to do that?" Naruko flinched at the mention of her village, and Jiraiya quickly intervened. There were some circumstances that prevented Naruko from staying there. "Why should we invest our time in training her?" Mei asked, her curiosity piqued. "And why help us in the war?" "Because it would provide her with battle experience and potentially an ally in the future," Jiraiya explained. "As for why we're helping, we have something that you would certainly find valuable." Mei's interest was now fully captured. "And what would that be?" she asked. Jiraiya smiled. "The sword of Momochi Zabuza." As Jiraiya mentioned Zabuza's sword, the air in the room seemed to tense. Mei's eyes narrowed, and she studied the 2 visitors carefully. The sword of Zabuza Momochi was a symbol of immense power, and its value to the rebels was undeniable. But there was something else, something unspoken, that lingered in the air. "Zabuza's sword," Mei murmured, her eyes flicking to the sword-wielding young man standing beside her. His gaze was equally sharp, though he remained silent for the moment. "I admit, that is a powerful offer." Jiraiya nodded, sensing that Mei was considering the full implications. He knew the rebels needed every advantage they could get in their ongoing struggle, and the sword would be a significant asset. But he also knew that trust had to be earned. The rebels might not want to simply take an offer at face value, especially when it came from an outsider. Naruko stood silently, her arms crossed as she assessed Mei and her surroundings. She wasn't entirely sure what to expect from the rebel leader. Mei had the aura of someone who had seen great loss and bore the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. But there was something else in her eyes, something calculating. Naruko couldn't help but feel that there was more to Mei than met the eye. "Why did you come here, Jiraiya-sama?" Mei's voice was calm but direct, breaking the silence that had settled over the room. "Offering a sword and training is one thing, but you're not the kind of man to do something like this without a reason. What is it that you want from us?" Jiraiya met her gaze evenly. "I'm not asking for anything in return, Mei-san. I simply believe that we can help each other. My student has untapped potential, and your forces need allies who can help tip the scales. The sword is a bargaining chip, nothing more. We don't want to see this war drag on any longer than necessary." Mei was quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable as she considered his words. She turned her gaze toward Naruko, who felt the weight of the moment. It was rare for someone like Mei to give her such scrutiny, and Naruko stood her ground. "I can't speak for all the rebels," Mei said finally, "but I will say this. The fight we're in is not just for our land, it's for our future. It's for the freedom of the people who are suffering. If you want to help us, it will take more than just offering a sword. We need people who are willing to fight alongside us, not just stand in the background." Jiraiya's eyes softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "I'm not just offering a sword. I'm offering my expertise as a teacher and a strategist. Naruko has the potential to be a powerful ally. I've seen it myself." Naruko nodded, her expression more serious now. She had long wanted to prove herself, not just to Konoha, but to herself. The journey to this point had been filled with uncertainty, but her resolve was clear. She wasn't just some child to be hidden away. She had grown stronger, and it was time for the world to see her for what she could truly become. Mei studied Naruko for a moment longer before speaking. "I will agree to your proposal," she said, her tone measured. "But only if you prove that Naruko can handle the responsibility that comes with it. The rebels are not a training ground for someone who is still untested in battle. You will need to show us that you are capable of standing alongside us in our fight, not just as a student, but as a warrior." Naruko's eyes widened slightly. "You want me to prove myself?" Mei nodded. "Yes. I don't trust easily, and I don't expect my people to follow someone who hasn't earned their place. If you want to train with us, you'll have to show that you can hold your own in a real fight." Jiraiya placed a hand on Naruko's shoulder, a reassuring gesture. "She's ready, Mei-san. I wouldn't bring her here if I didn't believe she could handle it." Mei's gaze flickered back to the young man with the sword at his back. "Ow, what do you think? Do you think Naruko can handle herself?" "Ow," the young swordsman nodded slowly. "She seems capable. But there's no room for mistakes in this fight." Naruko met Ao's gaze, determination flashing in her eyes. "I'm not afraid to fight. I'll prove it." Mei nodded in approval. "Very well. I'll arrange for you to take part in a training mission tomorrow. If you succeed, we'll begin your formal training and integrate you into the rebellion. But failure is not an option." Jiraiya smiled, proud of Naruko's response. "I'm sure she'll do just fine." The next day, Naruko found herself standing at the edge of the rebel camp, alongside Jiraiya and a small group of rebel fighters. They were preparing for a mission, one that would test her abilities in a way she had never been tested before. Mei had been clear, this was no simple exercise. They were going to raid a Kiri supply post, one that the rebels had been tracking for weeks. The mission was vital for their continued survival, and Naruko would need to prove her value in a real combat situation. Naruko felt a sense of urgency as they began to move out. This was her chance to prove herself, not just to Mei, but to herself as well. She could feel the weight of her potential pressing against her chest, but it wasn't fear, it was determination. As they approached the supply post, Naruko's heart raced. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew this would be the moment that would shape her path. The mission was about to begin. And with it, a new chapter in her life as a shinobi, one that would force her to confront not only her own strength but the realities of war. But little did Naruko know, the twist of fate had only just begun to reveal itself. A familiar presence, one that she had not expected to encounter so soon, was about to emerge, and it would change everything. The air was thick with tension as Naruko and the rebel team crept closer to the Kiri supply post, hidden in a dense forest clearing. They had carefully planned the assault for weeks, studying the patrol routes, guard placements, and the structure of the post itself. This would be Naruko's first real test, her opportunity to show what she was capable of in a high-stakes situation. Naruko's mind raced as she moved silently through the underbrush, her senses sharp. Her eyes darted to Jiraiya, who was walking a few paces ahead, leading the group. His usual carefree demeanor was absent. He was focused, as always when it came to missions. Despite his calm, Naruko could sense his underlying concern for her. He had always believed in her potential, but this was different. There was no turning back now. She had to prove herself. The group stopped at the edge of the clearing, hidden behind thick trees and large rocks. Ahead, a small camp of Kiri soldiers could be seen, relaxing around a fire. There were 6 of them, 2 near the fire, 4 by the perimeter of the camp, standing watch. Naruko quickly scanned the area, calculating their options. "All right, Naruko," Jiraiya whispered, his voice low but firm. "I want you to take the 2 by the fire. Use your clones to distract the perimeter guards while you handle the 2 closest to the supply crates. They're the key to this mission." Naruko nodded, her eyes steely with resolve. She had been trained to think quickly, but this was different. It wasn't just about defeating an opponent, it was about strategy, timing, and teamwork. She was no longer just a student following orders. Today, she had to take control of the situation and show her worth. She formed a series of hand seals, and within seconds, several clones materialized beside her, ready to carry out her instructions. The clones spread out, flanking the perimeter guards, while Naruko herself crouched low and began to silently approach the 2 soldiers near the fire. The crackling of the flames was the only sound that reached her ears as she moved. Her breath was steady, her mind focused. With a swift motion, she pulled out kunai, silently sending one clone to create a distraction to the right, throwing a kunai to the left to misdirect the guard's attention. As expected, they turned just as she dashed forward, her own movements quick as a shadow. Before the first soldier could react, Naruko was already upon him, her kunai at his throat. He froze, eyes wide, his weapon still holstered at his side. The second guard reached for his own weapon, but Naruko had anticipated his move. With a swift roundhouse kick, she sent him crashing into a nearby crate, momentarily dazing him. Naruko moved in quickly, knocking him unconscious with a well-placed strike. Her clones had already begun handling the perimeter guards, causing enough confusion to give Naruko the opportunity to strike without alerting the rest of the camp. The mission was progressing smoothly, and Naruko felt a surge of confidence. But then, just as she was about to signal to Jiraiya that the 2 guards were neutralized, a strange, familiar presence reached her senses. Her heartbeat quickened as she froze, her eyes darting toward the woods where the Kiri soldiers had been stationed. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a figure cloaked in the mist, a figure that made her blood run cold with recognition. It was Karen, the sharp-eyed kunoichi from the village she had once crossed paths with in the past. Their encounter had been brief, but Naruko never forgot a face, and certainly not someone who had been part of a group involved in a complicated situation. The last time they had met, Karen had been with a group of Kiri ninja, but Naruko had believed her to be far from the land of water. But now, here she was, standing in the shadows, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. Naruko's mind raced as her clones fought to hold the attention of the remaining guards. Was Karen here to stop them? Was she an ally or an enemy? And how had she found them so quickly? Karen's eyes locked with Naruko's, a knowing glint in her gaze. Her lips curled into a small, confident smile before she stepped out from the shadows, raising her hands in a non-threatening manner. "Impressive," Karen's voice carried clearly across the clearing, her tone calm but mocking. "You've come far, Naruko. But it seems you're not the only one with a few tricks up her sleeve." Naruko's eyes narrowed as her clones dispatched the last of the Kiri perimeter guards. She didn't take her eyes off Karen for a second. "What are you doing here?" Naruko asked, her voice firm but tinged with uncertainty. The situation had changed in the blink of an eye, and Naruko's instincts told her that this wasn't a coincidence. Karen's smirk faded slightly, her expression becoming more serious. "I could ask you the same thing. But I'm not here to fight. You're not the only one with unfinished business with the land of water." Naruko studied her, sensing that Karen was telling the truth. There was no hostility in her posture, no sign that she was here to engage in combat. She was here for a reason, but what was it? Jiraiya's voice broke through Naruko's thoughts as he approached, the rest of the rebel group following closely behind. His expression hardened when he saw Karen standing there. "Karen." Jiraiya's voice was low but filled with caution. "I didn't expect to see you here." Karen gave him a quick glance before focusing back on Naruko. "You've been busy, haven't you, Jiraiya-sama? You never mentioned you were bringing a child into the mix." Naruko bristled at the remark but kept her composure. She had been called many things over the years, but child wasn't something she was about to let slide. "I'm not a child," she said firmly, stepping forward. I'm capable. And I'm not afraid of you. Karen raised an eyebrow at her response, clearly intrigued but not dismissive. I'm sure you are. But be careful who you make enemies of in the land of water. Some things are better left untouched. At that moment, Jiraiya intervened, stepping between the two women. Karen, he said, his tone serious. We've been tracking a significant supply of weapons that the Kiri forces are stockpiling. If you're not here to stop us, then stay out of our way. Karen tilted her head slightly, her eyes flickering with an unreadable emotion. I'm not here to stop you. But you need to understand something. The rebellion is just one part of the bigger picture. There are others who have their own agendas in this war. Be careful who you trust. Jiraiya's expression darkened. I'm aware of that, but we don't have the luxury of waiting around. The rebels need this victory. Karen seemed to consider his words, then nodded. Then I'll leave you to your mission. But remember, there are things at play here that you don't fully understand. Be careful who you get involved with. With that, Karen turned and disappeared into the mist, leaving Naruko with 1,000 more questions than before. Her gut twisted with uncertainty. What was Karen's game? Was she truly an ally, or was this just the beginning of something far more complex? Let's finish this, Jiraiya said, breaking the silence as he gestured toward the supply post. We'll talk later. Naruko nodded, but her thoughts were far from the mission at hand. The appearance of Karen had introduced a new layer of danger into their already delicate situation. The mission was still on, but Naruko couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more at play than she had first realized. As they moved forward, Naruko couldn't help but feel that the storm was only just beginning. Dear YouTube family. Thank you for joining me on this fanfic journey. This story may be coming to a close for now, but stay tuned for more exciting adventures ahead. Don't forget to subscribe, so you won't miss out on what's to come. With gratitude. 6 Path Weeb.